They marched in their thousands, young, fearless, and unrelenting. They called themselves Gen Z, but to many, they were simply the voice of a frustrated nation. They weren't asking for much, just fairness, accountability, and a future worth fighting for. But their chants were met with deafening crack of gunfire, the hiss of tear gas, and the cold silence of police cells. By the time the smoke cleared, too many of them were gone. The streets that once rang with defiant songs now echo with the grief of families and the quiet questions of a country wondering how it came to this. Now, months after the blood dried on Kenya's streets, President William Ruto has unveiled a framework to compensate the victims of protests and riots, an unprecedented move in the country's history. At the heart of it is a controversial appointment. Professor Makau Mutua, longtime critic turned unexpected government ally, named as the principal coordinator of the State Intervention and Compensation Framework. The government says it will run for 120 days, identifying victims and processing payouts. Ruto's allies present this as a bold step toward reconciliation, a recognition that lives were lost and harm was done. But for many, the question is not how much will be paid. It is whether this is justice at all. Because for the families of those killed, no figure on a check can fill the empty seat at the dinner table. No government form can erase the trauma of watching a loved one's final moment unfold on a shaky, grainy video from the front lines of a protest. No public announcement can bring back the youth whose dreams ended under the heavy boots of law enforcement. And for a generation that has seen too much brutality in too short of a time, gestures without accountability ring hollow. Few stories capture the raw complexity of this moment more than that of Albert Ojang. Albert was a young man in his prime, a digital influencer, a creative mind, a voice that resonated with his peers. On June 7th this year, he was arrested. By June 8, he was dead inside a police cell. The official police account claimed self-harm, but the post-mortem report painted a very different picture. Blunt force trauma to the head, compression injuries to the neck, multiple wounds inconsistent with suicide. His death was not just a tragedy, it was a spark. Outrage swept across Kenya. In Nairobi, crowds poured back onto the streets, holding up posters of Albert's smiling face. They demanded answers. They demanded justice. His name trended online for days. Activists, clergy, and ordinary citizens spoke out. Albert became more than an individual. He became a symbol of what many saw as systematic impunity. His death was proof to them that in Kenya, protesting could be a death sentence. And then came the twist left the nation divided. In a move that stunned his supporters, Albert's father accepted 2 million shillings from President Ruto as compensation. For some, it was the act of a grieving parent seeking closure in the only way the system seemed to allow. For others, it felt like a betrayal, the selling off of justice for a sum that could never match the value of a human life. Social media lit up with fury. On X, one user wrote that justice cannot be bought. Another accused the government of attempting to pay its way out of guilt. The bitterness was palpable. President Ruto's framework steps directly into this minefield of grief and distrust. The choice of Professor Makau Mutua to lead it has drawn as much attention as the framework itself. Mutua is a seasoned legal mind, a man known for his fierce criticism of the current administration, and until recently an ally of the opposition. His appointment is being hailed by some as a sign of maturity, proof that the government is willing to work with former critics for the sake of national healing. But not everyone is convinced. Already, petitions have been filed in court challenging the legality of the appointment, arguing that such a role has no basis in the constitution. Beyond the legal wrangling lies the deeper, harder question. Will this process lead to real change? Compensation may help a family pay medical bills or replace lost income, but it does not hold anyone accountable for the bullets fired, the batons swung, or the tear gas unleashed. The same police officers accused of excessive force are, in many cases, still on duty. The same political leaders who dismissed protesters as criminals now stand at podiums speaking of reconciliation. Without structural reforms and prosecutions where warranted, critics argue the framework risks becoming a public relations exercise, a check-writing ceremony in place of justice. And the losses go far beyond than one name. The protest of 2024 and 2025 left a long list of young victims, some shot dead, others beaten, some simply disappeared. For every Albert Ojang whose case reached national headlines, there are others whose stories barely made the news. A 19-year-old student in Kisumu, a boda rider in Eldoret, a young mother in Mombasa who never came home after joining a rally. There were sons, daughters, brothers, sisters. They had plans, ambitions, and lives that mattered. Their families still wait for answers. The grief very still raw. The government insists that this is the beginning of a new chapter, that through this 120-day framework, it will not only compensate but also signal a new respect for the rights of citizens to protest without fear. Supporters point to the inclusion of Makau Mutua as a sign that the process will be independent and credible. But on the streets and in the comment sections, skepticism runs deep. Many Kenyans have seen such promises before, and they know how quickly commissions and task forces fade into memory once the political winds shift. As the clock starts ticking on this intervention, the stakes are high. For the families, this is not about policy or politics. It's about truth, about dignity, about ensuring that their loved ones did not die in vain. For the country, it is about whether it can confront its own failures and make good on the idea it claims to uphold. Kenya now stands at a crossroads. It can take the easy route, write the checks, hold the press conferences, and hope that public anger subsides. Or it can take the harder path, the one that demands full accountability, reforms to policing, and a genuine commitment to protecting the right to dissent. President Ruto has taken a step. Whether it is the first in a long, difficult journey or simply a gesture to calm the storm will soon become clear. But one truth will not fade. The youth who filled the streets were not just protesters, they were citizens. They were the future, and the blood spilled on the tarmac has written a chapter in Kenya's history that cannot be erased. How the nation chooses to respond, not just with money, but with memory and justice, will define that history for generations to come. Thank you so much for listening to this. My name is the commentator, Jukwake Papa Francis. Bye bye for now.